Take your feelings to God. Process them through prayer. Compare them to God's Word. Let God have the final say. So we talked about before, how our feelings are subjective and that we shouldn't run on them alone. Yes, God does give us feelings, but so does the enemy. And you know what happens? A lot of times we tend to get wrapped up in our feelings and we oftentimes get led astray, sometimes doing things we regret, so that's why we need to be very careful when we just run off of them, But take your feelings to God and then process them through prayer, have discernment on your feelings to see whether they're from God or from the devil, plain and simple as that. Then you're less likely to be led astray. And then compare them to God's Word, Compare everything, for that matter, to God's Word. That's another reason everybody gets led astray, They don't test the spirits like 1 John tells us to, And no wonder we have 500,000 false teachings running about, And that's problematic, especially in these last days, So many are being led astray. But compare them to God's Word, See what the fruits of the Spirit are, what the feelings come from God, and what feelings don't come from God, They are in the Bible, and you will see them. The fruits and everything else. And then let God have the final say, Let Him have the final say with everything, for that matter, but especially when it comes to things like feelings. Let Him have the final say with them, That way you're not acting out on the wrong types, doing things that you'll regret. That's so much of our problem, guys. We do these things we regret later, We get ourselves in sticky situations and we're stressed out, tired, anxiety, everything else, because we just run off of our feelings alone, and that's problematic. No, compare them to God's Word, process them through prayer, and you know what? Let God have the final say on them. Then you'll actually be able to get somewhere, You're less likely to get yourself into sticky situations, being led astray like we talked about. You're less likely to, It's just gonna work so much better for you than if you try to do it by yourself. I know we all tend to think we know what's best for us, but the fact of the matter is we really don't. God does. So just remember that, guys. Y'all have a great and blessed day. I love yous, and I'll talk to you guys soon.